Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and these are closed-door secret briefings about vital information about Scientology and the world, information that you need to know. And today's briefing is a continuation. It's part 4 and the final part of my briefing about L Ron Hubbard potentially being an intelligence officer. I've done an incredible amount of research in order to put this together, and it's a conspiracy theory, you could say, that I think's worth talking about, because it very well could be the situation of what went on with Scientology and Hubbard's life and everything. To people who are Scientologists, whether inside the church or outside the church, you do not know about the private life of L Ron Hubbard, and that's why the idea that he might be an intelligence agent is shocking, but that's because you've had so much information about him filtered from you. You've got his lectures and his books and stuff like that. They're all edited. Like they've been censored, you know what I mean? You don't get the private stuff about L Ron Hubbard's life. The truth about the situation is that those people who hate Scientology or who tend to be oversensitive lefties who just need to shut up with their whining, those sort of people that are like, oh, Hubbard used the word wog. Oh, what an offensive word to refer to people who are not Scientologists. Oh, it's so offensive, wog. Oh, you know, those sort of people who get offended by words. They just need to harden up and get some more life experience and just not get so offended by words. Anyway, those sensitive people you hear who say wild stuff about L Ron Hubbard being bad and stuff like that, there's honestly some truth to what these people say. And all the stuff they say isn't crap and isn't exaggeration. So some of the stuff, like L Ron Hubbard was an alcoholic, outrageous stuff like that is like, wow, there's actually truth about that. And so anyway, there's a whole other side to L Ron Hubbard. The actual, in Scientology, there's L Ron Hubbard, and that's like this created character that he created. And it's like the world savior and the perfect human, basically. But in the real life L Ron Hubbard, the actual L Ron Hubbard, that's a whole different person. It reminds me a bit of Christianity, really, how you got like this myth of Jesus, and then you've got, you know, the real guy called, I think, Yeshua ben Joseph or some name like that. And I'm sure he doesn't look anything like, I'm sure he didn't look anything like the pictures, and I'm sure the stuff he did was quite different. And it just becomes an urban myth. Like, humans tend to divorce from reality. Well, anyway, the reality of the situation, and en masse, people en masse tend to just go into delusion land on Earth. So when it comes to L Ron Hubbard, it's gone into delusion land amongst the Scientologists about L Ron Hubbard and the sort of personality he was, his abilities, stuff like that. Another point is that he wasn't even a Scientologist. If you actually look at L Ron Hubbard, his life and the things he did, for example, he came up with the tech, the admin tech to do comevs, and he would violate his own admin tech. Like, he was just like, whoa, he was insane, really. If you look at it, he was like schizophrenic. He had one personality one day and then another personality the next. Hence why he would come up with something like the OT levels, which says you're infested with other beings and stuff like that, because he was, you know what I mean? And there is a lot of truth to this whole entity thing, because I believe that you can channel stuff from other places, and certain people, when they use a lot of drugs or when they get abused, or when their mum smokes crack when they're in their mum's stomach or something like that, it fries the person's body, and then next minute they can start channeling these other dimensions, and other things can come in and they can get possessed, and this channeled being takes over. You know what I mean? Because channeling is true. If you don't know about channeling, look into it. But it's a true, real thing, channeling. They're beings in other places and they can take over a person's body and start giving out data. Well, sometimes you can channel crappy beings like demons, entities, crap like that, and they can take over. And somebody who uses lots of drugs, the dirty drugs, by the way, not the spiritual ones, they can get possessed and stuff like that. And anyway, just the truth about Hubbard's life is so like, whoa, to think that he was a degenerate. A very talented guy, as a part of his personality that was very cool. You know, one of his personalities, very cool. You know, the real L Ron Hubbard, you know, probably maybe very cool, very interesting, but because he was like off the rails, he gets shadowed over by the bad side, and it's just this crazy ball of just what the fuck, of this mixture of craziness. Anyway, so there's a whole other side to his life that Scientologists don't know about, and of that life, it might be that he was an intelligence operative. And here are the reasons why. Here's the last part of my briefing of all the reasons why Hubbard could have been an intelligence operative. And when you look at all these 4 parts that I've made, and you look at all the data, I don't think you can conclude that he definitely was an agent, but you can conclude that something was going on, and he very well could have been an agent. And I think it's worth knowing that. Anyway, so L Ron Hubbard had some dramas when he went to Rhodesia in the 60s, and then he had to flee. Apparently he whispered into someone's ear something like, you know, you're in danger. Some top person, like a top cop or a politician or something like that in Rhodesia, said something like, you know, oh, you know, you might, if you keep on doing that, you might get into trouble or something like that. And then 2 days later, the guy did get into trouble, and someone tried to kill him. And so it's like, whoa, was he instructed to send a message to that guy? And that guy didn't change his behavior, and so then whatever intelligence agency had to then actually do an assassination attempt on him or something. But that was strange. And then Hubbard, of course, had to flee because he was part of the little op, you know, to give him a warning, even though he wasn't. He could have been the one that did the assassination attempt. I don't know. I don't think so. But he was with the person who did the assassination attempt. You know, it's like, let's say you're having problems with your neighbour, and your neighbour comes up to you and says, you know, you better stop causing me problems or whatever, otherwise something bad's going to happen. And then 2 days later, some random guy shoots you. And you would think it's your neighbour, wouldn't you? You would go, hey, neighbour, you got your friend to shoot me or something like that. So anyway, so that's why Hubbard had to run, because he was part of the little op to whatever it was. So I don't know. I mean, it's all strange. What was Hubbard up to in Rhodesia? Because Rhodesia at the time had broken away from the British Empire and were being actually a rebel country, and they were going against the communist world government, which the British Empire was a part of, which is the United Nations and all that crap. So Rhodesia had broken away from that and said, no, we're continuing we're being our own independent country, and we're not going to do this lefty crap. And they were sort of being their own self. And it seemed like the world government were putting trade sanctions on them and giving them a hard time. Which is what they do. They do ways to pressure people into going along with these programs. So basically they force people to be a part of the world government and to do climate crap and to do COVID things and stuff like that. One of the ways is that they'll just starve a country. They'll just say, no, you're not allowed to import any petrol. You know, they'll just say, nah, and well, we're going to get together because you're a bad country and we're putting trade sanctions on this and we're going to block your funding to this, and they'll cause strife and stuff. That's why it's like, if you think it would be a cool idea to just go and take over your own country and then make your country not a part of the communist world government, well, you can't just succeed like that. Like, let's say Texas, right? If Texas just says, I've had it with America and this communist world government and the United Nations, we are breaking away being our own independent country, before you know it, they'll cut supplies to Texas, funding to Texas. They will fuck Texas up because they force people to be a part of them, you know? And so that's why this is war. This is really war. Anyway, so Rhodesia was being naughty boys and annoying Britain, because there's part of the theory with Hubbard being an agent is that he was possibly CIA agent, Naval Intelligence agent, or an agent of the British Empire. And anyway, I get into this later on, but Crowley actually had something to do with Naval Intelligence in Britain. So Hubbard could have been in the British Naval Intelligence or something like that. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting when I found out that Crowley potentially was involved with the British Naval Intelligence. I thought, oh yeah, of course, of all the intelligence departments, it had to be Navy Intelligence in Britain, didn't it? Because that sort of connects up with Hubbard and stuff. Because Hubbard seems to be like a little copycat of Crowley, because it seems that Crowley was secretly an intelligence operative his whole life, and Hubbard loved Crowley, and Crowley started his own rebellious religion, and it's like Hubbard just copied off him and potentially was an intelligence operative and started his own religion, and then was using that religion for intelligence ops, which it seems that Crowley possibly was. And anyway, if you look into Crowley's life, I know I'm going off topic, but if you look into Crowley's life, some guy wrote a book on it, and he laid out all the reasons why he thinks that Crowley could have been a government agent. And if you look into that and you conclude that Crowley was a government agent, which I think you can, there's even much more evidence than what Hubbard was, you can then go, oh, so sometimes these intelligence agencies create cults, or they get their agent to create a cult and then they use it for certain things, and it contributes to the idea that Hubbard could have been an intelligence operative. Anyway, so Rhodesia was being a rebellious country, and then Hubbard goes down there, and then I don't know what Hubbard was doing. I mean, he used the argument he was going down there to set up Scientology and maybe make a Scientology nation, and maybe he was. But maybe he was there trying to bring Rhodesia back in line with the British Empire. There's so many maybes in this, but that's just how conspiracies are. Because you can look at it both ways. You can say he was having trouble with Britain, he didn't like him, he wanted his own country, so he went down to Rhodesia that broke away from Britain so that he could be a part of that government. But he had to flee Rhodesia firstly. It's questionable what that was about. And then why did the Rhodesian government not assist him if he was actually anti-British and on their side? But it's all complex. It's very complex. I don't know. But anyway, it's just another thing that's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, Hubbard got to rub shoulders and be close with top politicians, famous people, throughout his life. It's like, how did he get in with these groups? You know, it's like, I don't know, like if I had a cult and I was going around the Mediterranean in a boat, I just don't think I would be able to suddenly be able to be invited to some event by the Moroccan king or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think it would be possible to get that far ahead. A lot of the time you look in life and you find out that people have gotten successful or something, they've had a helping hand. There's been something else that you don't know about that's actually made that occur. So I don't know, there's something to that. I just don't see how he had some letter of recommendation to join the Navy or something like that from some president or some top politician, and it's just like, oh, there's just all these things that are like, how did he do that? You know what I mean? And it just to me it indicates he had help from a network, if you know what I mean. Fletcher Prouty said that the church concealed a lot of his findings about L Ron Hubbard being an agent and ended up cutting off his payments. So isn't that interesting? So the Church of Scientology hired Fletcher Prouty to look into if Hubbard was an agent, and then Fletcher Prouty looked into it because he knows how the government works, and he was involved with these agencies and stuff, and he's a very smart guy. And then he goes, yeah, it does look like Hubbard was an agent. And then he found out almost too much information, and then the church had to go, no, and conceal his findings and then cut it off. Now, I got that information, I think, from Peter Moon or something, but that was interesting to hear that Fletcher Prouty said this, that he goes, no, the church just wanted me, I guess, to just say that he was an agent and then just leave it at that and not go on about all the other information. So they had to start concealing things. So that's interesting. And they cut off his payments or whatever. Because some people have the idea that they hired Fletcher Prouty to say he was an agent, and because they paid him to look into Hubbard's life, it was like a bribe for him to basically say, you've got to say Hubbard was an agent for us. Well, you got to say he was involved with Naval Intelligence. And that's what Prouty was looking into, by the way. So when I say agent, I'm not talking about, 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm talking about in the 40s. So Prouty looked into it and came back that Hubbard was an intelligence officer, and the church concealed some of his findings. Well, actually, hold on. A lot of his findings the church concealed. So that if Hubbard wasn't, that confirms the idea that Hubbard was an agent prior to Scientology. So you just look into this, you're just like, come on, Hubbard was an agent. It all depends on what things he was doing, and I think he was using Scientology to audit famous people and influential people and get data from them and then forward that to intelligence agencies and stuff to get blackmail info on them, because you get them saying their overts and stuff like that with time, place, form and event. You get that data from the person, and then you can control the person via blackmail and stuff. So talk about Hubbard violating his own spiritual technology, using it in such a shifty way like that. But yeah. Like, why would it be that you have to say with the overts, which is naughty acts in Scientology? So you're auditing someone in Scientology, and then you have to go into their naughty acts, the naughty things they've done. So it's just a perfect place to find out blackmail material. And when you go over those naughty things, you can't just say, oh yeah, I stole a car or something like that, and then just give the details and say, yeah, it was a red car and it was like in 2013, and it specifically says go over time, place, form and event, and it's like really get the information about that. Do you know what I mean? Like real thorough. Anyway, it's interesting. Apparently, Hubbard was introduced to Jack Parsons through Heinlein, and apparently we know that Heinlein was a government agent, and I think a naval agent. So that's another thing that makes you go, oh, okay, so Heinlein introduced Hubbard to Jack Parsons, and it seemed like when Hubbard got involved with Parsons' life, that was like a little operation to stuff up Parsons. So I think most of it indicates that he was a naval intelligence more than anything, but that he might have done some things in collaboration with the CIA, which I'm sure the Navy does all the time. LRH was a hypnotist. Apparently he honestly could hypnotize people. I believe that. Absolutely. And that's why he talks about it in the Dianetics book, like where the hypnotist pulls his tie and then the person coughs or whatever, because Hubbard knows about that stuff and he could do it. In fact, the government while he was being an agent probably trained him in how to do it, because it's an important skill when you're an agent. you need to be able to make people do certain things. You might need to get someone to talk about something in the past because you're trying to get that data from them. And so you just got to have this strong ability to get your will over theirs. Do you know what I mean? To control that person. Or you need to get, you're doing a little agent job and you need to get this chick to come go to the bridge. And so you're hanging out with her, and you got to be able to be strong with your will, because maybe she doesn't want to go to the bridge, and you got to be like, yeah, come on, we're going to go here to the bridge, and it's part of a whole operation that night. You got to get her to the bridge. That's your assigned task that night. So it's an important skill for an agent to be able to override someone's will and get them to do something. And Hubbard seemed to have had this ability a lot, and it connects up with the hypnotist ability and stuff. L Ron Hubbard knew about PDHing, which is the pain drug hypnotism thing, and this is back in I think 1951, and this is way before the internet and way before the MK Ultra information came out. But how did he know that the government could take someone and give them drugs and pain and hypnotize them, and then they could be like a robot, which is possible? How did he know this? Was that one of the things he was trained on? Was it because he was friends with intelligence agents? Because he himself was an intelligence agent? Because intelligence agents are friends with other intelligence agents, just like musicians are friends with other musicians and painters are friends with other painters. It's just how it is, There's more reasons, okay? Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond books, was a Naval Intelligence officer, and Hubbard loved Ian Fleming's books. So it's is it because he knows that Ian Fleming was letting out truths in his books and he understood them a lot? There's a guy called John McAfee who died recently, I think. In fact, the government might have killed him or something. But you look at John McAfee's life, and he seems like this wild, maybe criminal type person, and this funky guy. Have you heard of the antivirus McAfee antivirus or something like that? Those computer antivirus things. He was involved with that. And this guy, you look at his life and it's funky, and it seems that he's an agent. He was an agent for some group, or he was doing missions for some mafia or in some intelligence agency, similar to Hubbard, similar to Crowley. And you look at that guy and it's just interesting, because I reckon if you investigated his life, I looked into a little bit, and it did appear that somehow he was in some country, he was installing the computer softwares on some program. It's how did he get that contract to do that, and why did it end up leading to dramas? And then there was a rumor that he was working for some agency or something, and it's just this guy is so an intelligence operative. So people have the idea that government agents are like James Bond, but there are government agents that are like John McAfee. Okay? Where they're like these wild, loose cannon guys, and they have a bunch of money. It's how'd you get that money? And you find out that they did some things to get the money, and their lives are controversial, and they're getting into trouble a lot because they're doing certain things for certain groups. And I don't necessarily think John McAfee is loyal to the CIA or the FBI or some other group. But I just think that they've got a skill set, and somehow they might have started off in one agency, and then maybe they break away after that, but people hire them to get stuff done because that person can get stuff done. Like John McAfee, I remember hearing him talk about, he went to some jail cell, and it's why was he getting in trouble? And anyway, because he went to jail heaps, and it's why? What was he doing? You know what I mean? But when it was in the jail cell, he pretended like he had a heart attack, and he knew what he had to do to get out of that jail cell. So he was clever, and he was like, he delayed things, and there's some people who can just get stuff done, and they're willing to do crazy stuff. They're willing to, for like 24 hours, to pretend like they're having a heart attack so that they can get out of jail and manipulate the system. And they're clever cookies, and they're competent, and they've got balls. And that's who John McAfee was. And I feel like Hubbard was a similar sort of person like him, because if you look into John McAfee and you find out for sure that he's an agent or did some missions for the government, then you're much more likely to look into L Ron Hubbard's life and go, I bet you he was like John McAfee. He was a similar sort of thing like that. Anyway, if you look at the Sea Org, it was very Navy-like, and it was very military-like. And that could be because it was propped up by the Navy or the military. You know what I mean? And it was created by someone who was heavily involved with the Navy and the military, hence why it had all that theme to it, you know? Hubbard being an operative of the Navy, an undercover operative of the Navy. So Hubbard was involved with the occult prior to Scientology and stuff. And, you know, like the whole black magic thing and Crowley stuff and Thelema and all that. So the occult is basically like spiritual stuff, like magic and just spiritual things and stuff. But the occult tends to be heavily involved with intelligence agencies. And here's why. Because the occult can actually work. People can actually leave their bodies and view things at different locations, and people can actually put curses on other people, and it can actually work. Like, that's why they were hanging witches 300 years ago and stuff. Because Harry Potter shit works. Harry Potter stuff is the occult, and that's what these little cults are into. Basically, Harry Potter type stuff. It has technology there that can actually work, and it can't work all the time. Like, it doesn't work like as in ordering a Domino's pizza. Like, I can pull up a phone here, punch in Domino's, and I can get a pizza to come to our house, to come right here now. I mean, that works. The occult isn't that effective. It's not like every time you go and do and put a curse on someone, it'll then make that person have an accident or whatever. But it can actually work. It's not bullshit, okay? It's not bullshit. The occult is real. Harry Potter stuff is real, right? And this is why the intelligence agencies are involved with it, because it's a technology that can actually work. And that's why they're involved with it, because they're interested in it and they use it. That's why. If it didn't work, they wouldn't be involved with it. They wouldn't care about it, you know. But when it comes to things, you look into things in life, and there's free energy, and there's UFO technology, and there's atom bomb technology and stuff like that. But the government gets involved with those things because they work, and a lot of the time they keep what they have secret because only they want to have that. Okay, so the atom bomb, for example, I mean, I'm sure that's secret now. Like, imagine if you got some scientists together and tried to start working out how to make an atom bomb. The government would come after you real quick. But a lot of the technology that the government has that they're using right now, we don't know about. We only know about the stuff they were using like 50 years ago because they keep it secret from us. Because they don't want you having it. When they move on to a much better technology, they don't care about that older technology, then they let it leak out to the world and say, okay, you can have this crappy thing. We don't need it anymore. We've got something way better, right? That's why they don't release their UFO technology. It's the same with this black magic, spiritual, occult stuff. They're using it. They don't want other people using it. It works, and that's why they keep it to themselves. And that's why, for the past probably 150 years, these intelligence agencies have been using these things. And they have them tied up with their cult groups. And they don't like it leaking out to the public, and they don't want the public en masse practicing these things because they want to control them. Right? So intelligence agencies are heavily involved with the occult because they use it and it works. Right? So Hubbard was involved with the occult. So what does that make you think? It makes you think that Hubbard was involved with an intelligence agency because they're connected, the occult and intelligence agencies. So that's kind of interesting. They basically hide the tools that they use, and the occult has tools that they use, and they hide it from us. So people were being sent on board the ship, on the Apollo ship, to kill Hubbard, and apparently they'd been pain drug hypnotized by psychologists to kill him. They were mind programmed to kill him. That's a serious attack to get that. To get an assassination attempt, and an assassination attempt of that kind is like, whoa. That to me indicates that Hubbard wasn't just going around the Mediterranean with a kooky cult. That was like, he was doing stuff that really pissed off some agency out there. You know? And that to me, I think, is that he could have been, you know, we could be getting one agency versus another agency. I just think that if it was just some spiritual group, you wouldn't go to such extreme lengths to stop the person. But if this spiritual group was being used as a cover for an intelligence agency, and there's some other agency out there or some other military, and they don't like this agency because it's causing them problems, they would then send in a PDH person, a hypnotized person, to kill Hubbard to stuff up their operation. It's interesting. Like, when I get into it later on in this briefing, it seems that Hubbard was tied up with the CIA in an assassination attempt on the Moroccan king. Now, if you're using your cult as a cover for an operation to assist the CIA with assassinating a king of Morocco, you can understand how some group out there would not like Hubbard and would be hell-bent on trying to stop Hubbard, and would go to the extreme extent of sending in people who are mind-programmed to assassinate him. That makes sense to me, you know. I don't think it was that this kooky cult was going around the Mediterranean in a ship and they were trying to get in bed with certain countries so that they can make that country a Scientology country, and Scientology could take over the country or something like that. Like, it just doesn't seem enough to warrant that level of attack. That's like he really was doing something to piss people off. It just, yeah. Okay, so getting onto this, I'll get onto it now. It was a Moroccan coup. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's where you take over a country. Now I'm going to read. Well, I said it just before. It seems that somebody in the Moroccan government, some top security guy in the Moroccan government, was secretly involved with the CIA, and the CIA were training him in order to take over Morocco from the king. Because I think the Moroccan king was not liking America or the CIA. He was just wanting to do his own thing. Because I have to understand that after World War II, Russian communism was taking over the world, and American bullshit capitalism was taking over the world, right? Because it's not really, America is corrupted and secretly communist, but you know what I mean? Like America was trying to take over the world with their style. And you could have this Moroccan king that was just independent and didn't want to be involved with these big groups and stuff like that, and just wanted to be, I just want to be Morocco, I want to be in control of Morocco, I want to say what happens in Morocco, I don't fucking want some outside country getting in my business, let us be. But no, these outside interests come in continually with countries, and they pressure them and stuff, like I was saying earlier. So the Moroccan king seemed to have annoyed America, and so they trained up this top security guy in Morocco, and he came back from America, and then next minute there's an assassination attempt on the king of Morocco, and it failed. And then the Moroccan king, I think, assassinated this top security guy, and then suddenly L Ron Hubbard had to flee Morocco, and the Scientology ship had to flee Morocco. And it's like, well, why did they have to flee? And it's because they were involved with the assassination coup, and the king found out. That's what the most logical explanation is when you look at the information. L Ron Hubbard had his tech. He was doing his security tech. He was doing sec checks, actually, I think, on people in the Moroccan government prior to the assassination attempt, and they got some contract to do these security checks. So this is where it's like, oh, it's just innocent church. It likes to audit people and help people spiritually, yet it's involved with like a freaking government and a top level of security check in a government. It's like, oh gosh, that seems interesting. Like, how did you sell Morocco on that? But the CIA were trying to infiltrate Morocco, and they must have talked, the CIA and Hubbard and stuff must have talked Morocco into getting this sec checking done with Scientology. And the Moroccan king at the time was concerned about communists, I think, taking over the country, and I'm sure Hubbard and America exaggerated that threat, and they, said, oh, you need to do this sec checking and stuff to make sure that your government isn't infiltrated by communists, because a sec check is basically a security check. It's a thing done on an e-meter where you if someone's a secret agent or doing illegal, dodgy stuff, you can find it out using the e-meter, because the e-meter is almost like a lie detector. Honestly, it is almost like, it pretty much is a lie detector. It's a lie detector, but you can use it in like spiritual therapy way as well. Anyway, so this is what I think could have happened. When they were doing their sec checks, when the Scientologists were doing the sec checks on the Moroccan government, they could have found out about these people trying to organize a coup, and the CIA being involved and stuff like that. And the Scientologists could have not told the king, because they were in on the plot themselves. You see what I mean? Now, after the assassination attempt fails, the Moroccan king could have then looked through files or spoken to people who are involved with the Scientologists and the sec checking, and could have found out that the Scientologists covered up the fact that there was an impending assassination attempt on the king or something. And then that was when the king was like, oh, let's get Hubbard, because it was like, Hubbard's obviously in bed with the people who were trying to assassinate him. And then Hubbard had to do a runner, and he went for 8 months in hiding in New York. He just went hiding in New York undercover, so that he couldn't get traced down. So I just don't think we have a good explanation as to why Hubbard and Scientology had to flee after the failed assassination attempt on the king. All I can see is that it indicates that they were involved with the operation. That's why. It's such a bold, outrageous idea to suggest that some unusual cult was a part of a CIA operation to assassinate a king, that some Scientologists and former Scientologists don't even entertain the idea. And it's like, well, no, entertain the idea. Think about that. Hold on a second. What went on with the Moroccan assassination attempt? What the hell was that? If Hubbard was innocent, then Hubbard would say to the king after the assassination attempt, hey, king, I can't believe that there was an assassination attempt. We need to do more sect checking. We didn't get to enough people in time. Continue the government contract. You know what I mean? But what do you do when you suddenly flee the scene? It's because you've committed overt. Hubbard said, Hubbard blew Morocco. Why did Hubbard blow Morocco? Because he did overt. He was dodgy. He did something, and I bet ya, he was involved with the CIA operation to assassinate the king. And we have to think, why would the CIA want to do this as well? You have to understand that the CIA is heavily tied in with the Mossad, which is Israeli intelligence. And America is very Jewish. America is totally Jewish infiltrated, right? So we're going to get into territory here that's very naughty, and people who are like lefties will accuse me instantly of being anti-Semitic and stuff like that, and the Jewish conspiracy and stuff like that. But America is a very Jewish society. There's Jews that are at the top of their governments, at the top advising their governments, and in the media, and just it's so Jewish, America. It was probably American in the 1800s, but not in the 1900s. The 1900s was just America got taken over by Jews, and so the Israeli intelligence, which is called Mossad, is very closely connected to the CIA. And Australia is the same, actually, because Australia is just a miniature version of America. And we're very Jewish in Australia, and Melbourne's very Jewish, actually, speaking of that. I'm really getting into naughty stuff here, and I shouldn't be talking about this, but it's just the truth. I mean, Melbourne's got, I think, the third biggest Jewish community outside of Israel. It's a very big Jew place, Melbourne. And so I've noticed that our intelligence agency here in Australia is Jewish infiltrated. It does the agenda of Mossad, and it seems that the CIA is doing the agenda of Mossad, right? So just follow with me. I'm going to get somewhere with this. So why is this going on? And the thing is that, who was the Moroccan king? He was an Arab. He was, I think, a Muslim. So what's going on? It seems that Mossad and Jewish intelligence and stuff are in bed with America and use America to destabilize the Arab world and to take it over, sort of. And that's why we get all these dramas like in Syria and Lebanon and Afghanistan and stuff like that, because Israel is taking out their enemies, basically. And America is like Israel's little bitch. And they go in there and obviously defense contractors want to make money and stuff like that. But you've got to look at Israel and what they're up to and stuff. And it seems like they caused 9/11, actually. That honestly, it seems like they caused 9/11. And why? Because they have the American government infiltrated. So whenever I say the government did 9/11, it's not that simple. It's more complex. It's the American government infiltrated by Israeli intelligence did 9/11. So like personally, I honestly believe that if Israel as a country never existed, then 9/11 wouldn't have ever happened. Because it seems like 9/11 they blamed on Saudi Arabia or something like that, and they totally deflected away from the Israeli involvement in 9/11, and so they didn't want anyone thinking Israel was involved. But there was some remote viewer, because you can get some awesome data from remote viewers, who looked into the 9/11 thingo, and he got data that I think the missile that hit the Pentagon came from an Israeli naval ship. So the remote viewers can get core data that goes, whoa, straight to the point of like, what the hell? The missile came from an Israeli, because they pretended like a plane hit the Pentagon. A plane never hit the Pentagon. It was a missile that hit the Pentagon, right? And that came from an Israeli ship. It's like, whoa, that's deep. But there's other clues, and I think David Icke has actually talked a bit about it, and that's why he gets accused of being anti-Semitic, but he's not. He just knows the problem of the country of Israel and the sort of problems they're causing. In fact, when he tried to come to Australia 2 years ago, they just said he couldn't come. They just denied him entry, and they said he was a anti-Jewish or something like that. The Anti-Defamation League, which is a Jewish league, somehow pulled strings to make him not be able to come into the country. When he'd come 3 years earlier, I went to see him at the event. And I got to interview him on the community TV show I was hosting at the time, and that was pretty cool. But just 3 years later, even though he hadn't really changed in what he'd been doing, they just decided to say, nah, he can't come into Australia anymore. So they were really ramping up the police state here in Australia. I just hate police states so much. They just said, no, he can't come. Because I think I bought a ticket to that event, and then they just got denied. He got denied entry. Anyway, so why would Israel want 9/11 to happen? Because it spurred up the Americans, so they shot over there to the Middle East and started doing things that Israel wanted. And why does Israel not get into trouble for the aggressions that they do? Because, like, let's say there was something that happened 4 months ago or 6 months ago, where Israel just blew up a bunch of things, and Palestine blew up some other stuff as well. But it seems that Israel instigated and all this stuff, and the news reports, they just weren't picking on Israel. And the way you watch the news and they criticize China, and they're like, oh, China's going to invade Taiwan, and China's bad, China. And they go, Russia, ooh, greedy, corrupt Kremlin and dictator Putin, and ooh, Russia. And then when it comes to Israel, it's like they're literally blowing up buildings and shit and invading areas of Palestine, and it's like, oh yeah, just a bomb went off in Israel the other day. And it's like, that's just all they say. They don't criticize them. So Israel is a part of us, a part of America, a part of the New World Order, basically. And so it seems that I think that they wanted to take out the Moroccan king because he was an Arab Muslim, and he was probably part of an Arab Muslim alliance, and it was a part of them keeping Israel strong, because it's a holy war. It's a holy war between the Muslims and the Jews, full blown. And the Jews, the Muslims don't believe what the Israelis say and stuff. The Muslims secretly believe that the Jews run the world, and they don't trust them. That's why they're not getting the COVID vaccine. I mean, honestly, they're not. This is why. Because, I got a friend who... Hold on. I got a friend that was with a Muslim girl, and he ended up going to a mosque years ago. And at the mosque, they were saying stuff like "death to America," and honestly, stuff like that, saying we hate America and stuff like that. And it's like, why? And it's because they consider us dumb white people that are being manipulated by the Jews. I mean, honestly, this is what they think. Okay? I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm just saying this is what they think. Okay? And this is why when they hear news reports about COVID and stuff like that, and a vaccine, all that sort of stuff, they're just like, we're not going along with this crap. Because they believe in the Jewish conspiracy, basically. It's a holy war between the Muslims and the Jews. And that's what's going on. So this is why you have to know all this stuff about the world before you can look at this information and try and work out what the hell happened in Morocco. Because the CIA is tied in with Mossad. They're forwarding Jewish agendas. It's part of the holy war, honestly, right? And that's why they wanted to get rid of the Arab king. Because I originally thought, I looked into it and I thought, okay, so communism taken over the world and Americanism was taking over the world. So wouldn't they want Morocco to be nationalistic and strong and have a king? Because communism was about knocking off the kings, right? And to stop the communism takeover, you need countries to be nationalistic and strong and the way they traditionally are, and not to become a bunch of lefties who have a revolution, which is what the communist thing is. So I thought Hubbard was trying to fight the anti-communism agenda and was trying to stop Morocco from getting infiltrated by communism. And then you look into it further and you're like, hold on a second. It seems like they were possibly drumming up the communist threat and using it as an excuse to infiltrate Morocco, and then to topple the dictator of Morocco or the king of Morocco so they can put their guy in. And it's like, hold on a second, why the hell would you do that? And then you think, I heard someone mention, I think, that it's because the CIA and America is involved heavily with Israel. And it's part of the holy war. And I know this must sound like crazy sort of conspiratorial ramblings, but there's seriously truth to it. And then that was when my idea of Hubbard lowered, because my initial thought was Hubbard hated communism. He was trying to take over the world with Americanism to save the world with the freedom ideas. But then you go, well, maybe taking over Morocco, maybe putting in a politician who's in bed with the CIA in Morocco, maybe that will make Morocco freedom-loving Americans. And that. But it's concerning when you're trying to save the world from communism, but then you use that as an excuse to take over a country, and you're the one who's taking over the country. Like, I get the theory. That's why the problem is when you say it's for the greatest good, then you could just do anything. You could say, no, we needed to kill the Moroccan king because it was for the greatest good. We needed to have a person that was 100% American Constitution loving and stuff, so that Morocco could have those ideas, and then that country doesn't get taken over by communism. And then you go, well, yeah, let's kill the Moroccan king then, because we've got to save the world from communism, because they're infiltrating other countries. We better infiltrate Morocco, you know. And you're kind of right. You're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, what, you're just going to let communism keep on taking over country after country after country? I mean, we have to start taking over countries now. I mean, it's a crazy race. You know, it's like, what do you do? Like, when you got the idea for the greatest good, I mean, you're just kind of stuffed, because you can just end up doing crazy shit. I mean, you don't know where do you end with this idea, you know? So, I don't know. It's a wild way of going about things. So anyway, it could just be that they wanted a government of Morocco that was totally a puppet of America to try and save the world. And they were doing it to country after country after country, right? Or it's because of the Israeli infiltration of the CIA and they didn't want a strong united Arab world that would be a problem for Israel. And it also, like what they do is what these shifty governments do and stuff, and what Israel does is they'll do things like they'll let like a bomb attack go in a country like Lebanon to make that country destabilized and in turmoil and hating their government, so then they never become strong and attack Israel. You see? And this is why you've got that big bomb that went off a year ago in Lebanon. And honestly, that could have been done by Israel. Because I don't know if you saw the footage, but you can look it up. You can see the footage of just a bomb going off in Lebanon, a huge bomb, and they said it was, of course, it got blamed on the government, of course, because they were storing some things in some port or whatever, and they forgot it was stored there, and something went wrong, and then suddenly just a whole thing just blows up. I mean, what perfect way to destabilize that city in that country and make them hate their government because their government stuffed up and made a bomb go off. That could have been done by Mossad, Israeli intelligence, as a way to make sure that their neighbors don't become strong and united. Because what would happen? Palestine could be teamed up with Lebanon and have a strong Arab world and then unite against the Jews, right, and kick them out of Israel. Because the Jews invaded Israel, literally, full-blown just invaded it. It's a holy war that's been going on for like 5,000 years. Anyway, it's pretty interesting, but Britain was involved in Israel, right? And they gave and created the country. No, sorry, Britain was involved. It was called Palestine, that area. They created Israel, the country. They literally just created it. And then they started taking over more and more territory. So Britain's always been on the Israeli side and has always been infiltrating Palestine, right? And Britain's been infiltrating the Middle East and wanting it part of their empire, and have had parts of it in their empire, right? And who's in bed with Britain? America. They're totally in bed. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America. They're like all one country. They're all combined. They're just totally in bed with each other, the English-speaking countries. The people look the same. The culture's very similar and stuff. Now, so it would make sense that the CIA would be doing things to prop up Israel, and that might be certain things in the Arab world, and it might be stuff like getting rid of the Moroccan king because he was too Muslim loving. He was too keen on uniting the Arab world or something like that, because they don't want an Arab empire taking over the Middle East. They want their empire taking over the Middle East, and that's why Mossad could have done 9/11, because they're so in bed with America and they both benefit from doing 9/11, and then they get to go into Afghanistan and all these other countries. I mean, it was all planned beforehand. I mean, you can look at, there's a dude that was friends with one of the Rockefellers, and one of the Rockefellers literally said to him before 9/11, he said, oh, there's going to be some big event that happens, and after that we're going to go invade a bunch of countries in the Middle East, and we're going to be looking for terrorists and stuff, and it's not really true. There's no real terrorists. We did it all and it's fake and stuff. And then he also said there's plans to microchip everyone and stuff. And the guy was like, whoa, what the hell? Alex Jones interviewed him. And then it happened. You know what I mean? These things are planned. They planned years before. So anyway, so that Morocco thing is just like, whoa. I mean, whoa. So anyway, so there's, I'm going to read out here something that Peter Moon said about this Morocco event. right? Because I saved it. And let's see. Okay, so this is about the Morocco thing, and it's from I think Peter Moon's book. So is about the failed attempt to assassinate the Moroccan king. What was said over the phone was not revealed, but shortly after, the king, with 3 of his 4 children, had sped away to his summer palace in a small black Renault 16. A Moroccan Air Force jet made 4 passes at the field, shooting up cars, scattering the honor guard, killing 8 people and wounding 47. Wow, they really tried to kill this Moroccan king, but they failed. The king got away unscathed. The next morning, it was announced that 8 hours after the attack on the king's plane, Ufkur, who was the security guy that was trained by the CIA secretly, had shot himself in the head at the king's palace. The word from the palace was that Ufkur was the mastermind behind the coup. Oh, and he was getting trained by the CIA. The king's plane was to have been shot down over water, thus appearing to be an accident. So they wanted to make it look like his plane accidentally crashed and stuff, but they shot it down and they wanted to kill him, but they failed. The phone call from the tower made by Ufkur was presumably to order the jets to shoot the king on the ground, after he had realized that he had not been killed in the air. So Ufkur was on the phone monitoring the event, going, "Go get him with the jet, he didn't die in the plane crash, blah, blah, you got to shoot him now, blah, blah." And then they shot all his cars and stuff, and they ended up killing eight people, wounding 47, but they still didn't get the king. Subsequent to these events, Hubbard pushed the sect-checking project even more heavily. Now, surely the Moroccan government would realise the high necessity to utilise any and all methods to root out the remaining plotters against the king. The students in the course were taught to sect-check each other, and the worksheets were turned over to the supervisor of the course. One day, among these worksheets, evidence turned up that the very people who had approved the security checking were involved with the coup attempt. So the people in the Moroccan government who were involved with assassinating the king, they're involved with the coup attempt, they were the ones that wanted Scientologists in there doing security checks. Now that to me indicates that the Scientologists are on their side. That to me indicates the Scientologists were on the CIA side and they wanted to get the Moroccan king out of the situation, and that's why they were trying to approve the security checking. So that's kind of interesting, and I think the king would have found that out. He would have found out who the people were who were doing the he would have found out the people who were doing the coup attempt, and then he would have noticed that they're tied in with the Scientologists, and he would have realised, oh, so the Scientologists were tricking us. They were making us think that we were going to weed out the communist infiltrators, right? But all along, they were the ones damn well infiltrating us. So see this whole shiftiness? You know, you walk up to an organisation and you say, hey, you know, I'll help you find out, you know, who are the bad guys trying to infiltrate you and stuff. Meanwhile, you're the bad guys trying to infiltrate them. And then you get access to the files and stuff and all that data, and you get all that trust, right? And you just infiltrate the hell out of them, and you keep the sect-checking data secret. Like, you don't reveal to the king the real sect-checking data, which is that it's you guys who are the infiltrators. You see what I mean? So it's like, whoa. So this is what this person says, and I don't know if I agree with their conclusions, but it's all very complex. But this is what they say in the Peter Moon book. It's a puzzle as to why they had approved the sect-checking project, except to say that they feared that someone loyal to the king might be approached by us and decide sect checking was a good idea, it would then have been out of Ufka's hands. At least this way it was under his control. But I don't think he really expected anything to come of it. He didn't expect the real dirt to be dug up. Boy, was he wrong. Well, needless to say, the sect checking was terminated and we were given 12 hours to vacate Morocco. All the people who connected to General Ufka were later put on a boat that was sunk, and as a result of the fact they somehow were in the area during the 7-day war between Israel and Egypt, they all died, including Colonel Allen, whom we had gotten to know so well. So the Scientologists had gotten to know Colonel Allen, who they killed. So the king totally worked out who the people were who tried to assassinate him, realized that Scientologists were connected to them, and then they kicked out Scientology. Right? And maybe the king couldn't know for sure. He couldn't say, I'm 100% certain the Scientologists were in on the plot. But he could look at the information and go, okay, I totally don't trust these Scientologists. They seem CIA. They seem like they're part of the situation and stuff. But whenever you hear these stories about people who were involved with the CIA and church and stuff like that, they don't know the whole world political situation. They don't know that Hubbard potentially was an agent and all that stuff. So when they tell their stories, they say their conclusion. They're not lying, but they can make a false conclusion because they're just trying to work out what's going on. So there's that. That was interesting, I think. Now, so here's from the Peter Moon book. The summer and fall of 1972 was a very exciting time on the Apollo. Hubbard had several operatives glad-handing the Moroccan government in order to win influence and secure safe ports in Morocco. Really? Or is there more to Hubbard's glad-handing? I don't know, a bit of a weird expression, but is there more to the glad handling? Is there, why would they want to get involved with this Moroccan government? You know what I mean? Is it because they were a way for the CIA to sneakily infiltrate? On the Apollo, we even entertained the Princess of Morocco, and it was only a matter of time before the king himself, Hassan II, would be introduced to Scientology. Hubbard's initial angle was to use Scientology security checking on government officials for security purposes in order to protect the king. Oh, that's what you say. It's, well, we want to help you protect the king, but meanwhile, you're the one who are putting the king under threat and you're secretly infiltrating them. This is how sneaky things are. Hubbard, one thing is with Hubbard and with things in the world is you look at the opposite of what they say. If something's safe and effective, it means it's not safe and effective. If something's a really, really dangerous pandemic that's going to kill everyone, it means it's not a really, really dangerous pandemic that's going to kill everyone. You see what I mean? It's the opposite. So we're here, we need to help you protect the king for security purposes and let's do this sect checking stuff. The opposite. You're the one that's going to lower the security of the country and you're going to kill the king, basically, you know. Hassan II would likely have been very interested in these security techniques because he had previously had to escape to France to avoid assassination. Because they'd tried to assassinate him before. Well, I don't know if it was them, but it probably was. But there was a previous assassination attempt years before. All of these efforts backfired in a big way when one of the king's escort planes fired upon his plane. The very clever king radioed the assailing plane and told him the monarch was dead. It worked. The king's plane was able to land, but there was still a major problem. The Moroccan defense minister, Colonel Mohammed Ufker, the guy I was talking about before, was summoned to the control tower prior to the king's landing. Fighter jets then descended upon the landing party and several people were killed, but the king escaped. The only person who could have ordered such was Colonel Ufka. He was blamed, and with good cause. Although it was stated he committed suicide, his body was riddled with bullets. And he is said to have been killed by the secret police chief, who was later knocked off himself. So the king ended up killing the guy who was part of the plot, who was secretly trained by the CIA, who was part of the plot to assassinate him, who was leading the plot to assassinate him. Obviously following orders from the CIA, was probably trained up heavily. The problem for the Apollo was that Ufka had readily embraced the efforts of Hubbard. Possibly only, well, look at this. The problem for the Apollo was that Ufka had readily embraced the efforts of Hubbard. So Ufka was pro-Hubbard. Was that because Ufka was told that Hubbard was one of him, was part of the CIA? Possibly only to prevent the king from getting hold of these security procedures himself, and possibly identifying his own defense minister as a threat. That's this person who said this story. That's what they think. Okay? That's their conclusion from the information. That's them justifying why Ufka was pro-Scientology. But I think there's a whole other reason why. See, when you find out what's going on with Hubbard's life, well, let's say the private stuff about Hubbard being a drug addict and an alcoholic and stuff like that. When you talk to people who are brainwashed in Scientology, they explain things away and they come up with bullshit reasons for things that are like, they're not the real reason. That's just them, from the data that they know, that's them working out an explanation for it. But it's wrong, right? So they say, oh, like, for example, Hubbard on the Apollo ship had a little storage collection of alcohol. And Hubbard had said that the alcohol was gifts that he'd been given that he didn't like. And he used them to re-gift to other people. Well, you could just believe that. Or you could actually think, no, Hubbard was into alcohol and it was his alcohol stash. You know what I mean? But somebody who's brainwashed in Scientology, doesn't know all the dirty side about Hubbard's life, will just go, yeah, I mean, Hubbard had a little alcohol collection because he got gifts from lots of people and they were alcohol and he didn't want to have it. And so he was in storage, and he's a good little Scientologist, and he knows that alcohol causes engrams and alcohol's bad, and he could beat addiction, and he was a superpower man who could take over the world, and his postulates always became reality. But the truth is that he couldn't even stop himself from drinking alcohol. He was so not OT. He just was not an OT, So the person who wrote this is what they think from looking at the information, but I think they've come to the wrong conclusion. And I think if they had looked into things more, they'll come to different conclusions. As the Apollo was closely identified with Ufka, we were told to leave the country within 24 hours. Ufka was trained extensively by the Mossad. Did you just hear that? Ufka was trained extensively by the Mossad and the CIA. So what was I saying? That the CIA and the Mossad, Israel and America are like combined. America's Jew infiltrated. They're like the same thing, and they're forwarding the Jewish agenda in the Holy War. That's what's going on. See, I mean, if I didn't read stuff like this, because we already know about the theory that Mossad caused 9/11, right? But then you read stuff like this and it just says, Ufka, the dude who tried to assassinate the Moroccan king, the Arab Muslim Moroccan king, Ufka, tried to assassinate him, and he was extensively trained by Mossad and the CIA. So what does that indicate? That Ufka, it wasn't about communism. It was about forwarding the Israeli-Jewish alliance, the Israeli-American alliance. It was about destabilizing the Arab world. This Ufka guy probably had a network of other Arab countries, and they were potentially going to be a threat to Israel, so they had to get rid of him. It had nothing to do with communism. But I'm sure Hubbard drummed up the communism threat. Oh yeah, and it seemed like the CIA had been doing this a lot. You look into Israel, you look into CIA, and numerous countries, they exaggerated that communism was taking it over, so then they had an excuse to get involved with that country and stuff. It's just so shifty. You know, we've got, that's why you got that dictator, you got the Arab Spring event, I think, and that dictator which Sacha Baron Cohen was mocking. And guess who Sacha Baron Cohen is? He's a Mossad intelligence operative. He's a Jewish intelligence operative. I don't even think he knows it, but he is. And he's forwarding Jewish agenda stuff. He doesn't even know it. He just thinks he's being a funny comedian. But he was playing a character of the Gaddafi character. He had a comedy character or whatever that was clearly a rip on Gaddafi. And is just being silly and funny, but he's promoting the idea that Gaddafi was this bad guy and a dictator and stuff like that, and that's a CIA agenda. If he was around, if Sacha Baron Cohen was around in the 70s, he would probably be doing an imitation of the Moroccan king, Hassan, this Moroccan king guy, and going, oh yes, I'm a dictator, blah, 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 and acting all bad and stuff. And what it does is, it enables Americans to feel good about infiltrating these countries. And they think that they don't think they're infiltrating the countries, they think they're liberating the countries. No, they're not. America and Israel, you're just full-blown infiltrating countries and you're causing wars. Let these countries rule themselves. Let them look after their own people. Don't go after these bullshit international agendas and stuff. I believe in nationalism. I believe in each individual country being left alone. They do their own thing. They look after their own citizens, not having these sellout politicians that work for international movements like the Australian politicians. Do you think the Australian politicians do anything for us? They treat us like shit. They just forward international agendas. They're not nationalistic at all. Not at all. They don't care about their own country at all. They're absolute prostitute, whores, sellouts. They're fucking scum. Fucking scum. Look at Dan Andrews, the dictator of Victoria. Absolute fucking scum. What does he look after Victorians? No. He treats us like absolute trash. He's destroying Victoria. He's bankrupting businesses. Why? Because he's forwarding some fucking international agenda. Okay? He doesn't look after his local area. He's not working for us. He pretends like he's working for us, but he is not. He's working for international crap. Okay? So that's what's going on. You got these people who are dictators, and they make them out to be like these crazy evil dictators, but they're not. They're just people who want to look after their own country. Probably like the the Iraqi guy, Saddam Hussein? Is that his name? I can't even remember. But you know, the Iraqi guy who they knocked off in like 2002 or whatever, or they infiltrated in 2002, they had some war or whatever, right? After 9/11, they took out, who did they take out? They had 9/11 happen, they blamed it on some terrorist, and somehow that gave them the excuse to infiltrate Iraq. And then they infiltrated Afghanistan and all this bullshit. Because they said Iraq was like harboring terrorists or something. It was crap. They did the terrorist attack. It's like they released COVID, right? The bug. They released COVID bug, and then like they use it as an excuse to do all this stuff. They released it. I mean, it's just they're shifty. They're manipulating things. So this Saddam Hussein, I think his name is. You know, your mind turns to mush when you look at so much information. There's just so much stuff going on in the world, and you're like, whoa, 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 and you can't really remember things. But do you think that he really was an evil dictator? I mean, I heard that when they go into these countries, they don't make these countries better. They make you think that they're liberating these countries, but they're not. They show cherry-pick footage of one crowd pulling down a statue of the dictator, and those citizens in that country didn't want to get infiltrated. It's bullcrap. Like Italy, in World War II, they infiltrated Italy. And they knocked off Mussolini and stuff. Italians liked Mussolini. And then now look at Italy and stuff. I mean, it's just, when all the countries are just in bankrupt and in debt, and they've been hoarded out by the international communist government. They've just been destroyed. What you need is each area looking after itself and having a politician and a leader that actually looks after their area, that actually works for them. Because imagine, like, if I got to become dictator of Australia or Victoria, right? What would I do? I would do things to make this place good, and I would turn to the climate agenda and the COVID agenda and the other ones, the gay agenda and all that stuff, the depopulation agenda, and I would turn to them and I'd say, fuck off. I'm doing what's good for this country. This is my fucking place, and I'm looking after this place. I'm not doing bullshit. Do you understand? Okay? I'm not going to make them lock down those businesses. I'm not going to make those people go bankrupt. In fact, I'm going to lift this rule, 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 and do you know what's going to happen? These people will have freedom. And what happens then? Prosperity comes, happiness comes, health comes, goodness comes. I'm not going to whore out. But what do? They put in these sleazy lawyers, these good public speaking salesman lawyers, these sleazy pricks that go up there and say, Australia stands for, like there's a speech by the Australian Prime Minister. You can watch the video. I'm going to post it actually. Where he goes, Australia stands for democracy and doing what the people want and rights and freedoms. And at the same time, they show the footage of all the police abusing people because of COVID. You know, they're like people getting shot by rubber bullets, COVID protesters, and people getting aggressively arrested, and the whole police state. And over the top of it, this sleazy politician saying his bullshit of Australia stands for this and that. And it's just like, no, you don't. You are directly lying through your teeth. And if you're in that role as a prime minister, right, you should be screaming around trying to make this all go backwards and say, no, stop rolling out the police state. We stand for democracy. We stand for women's rights, blah, blah, blah. But they don't. They will arrest women, abuse women, and it's just all this, it's just bullshit, right? Because these politicians are whores. They're political prostitutes. That's what they are. They're political prostitutes. And that's not even, I don't want to offend someone who's a prostitute, because that's like a noble, respectable profession compared to these politicians. Nothing is scummier, disgraceful, just despicable more than anything than these communist, whore, fake politicians that we've got running our countries. Anyway, so these Arab kings and dictators seem to want to actually look after their countries, and they're not bad. It's just that they're not going along with the international agendas. So you get some freaking agent like Sacha Baron Cohen going around making some comedy thing mocking them. And what does Sacha Baron Cohen do as well? He mocks Americana ideas and Americans, and he's got this stupid documentary out where he goes around America during a COVID lockdown, and he mocks Americans who are, like, he makes them out to be rednecks, and he mocks Americans who, you know, are Trump lovers and American loving, because he doesn't want America to exist. He doesn't want nationalism. He wants internationalism. He wants the freaking communist world government. That's what he's forwarding. And I don't even think he knows that he's an agent, but they're propping him up, and they're saying, yeah, we've got funding for this movie idea. Do you like this idea? And he's like, oh, that could be funny. And they're like, yeah, make it Sacha Baron Cohen. Yeah, go do this thing. And go to the down south and mock them and blah, 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 blah. And then when, you know what? In that story, when you go into a Jewish mosque, we're not going to be mocking the Jewish mosque. No. It's just going to be like sensible and stuff. But then when you go to those other American things, you do all these silly things and you attack them, but at the Jewish mosque, you don't. At the Jewish church or whatever, temple, you don't. And then you watch this documentary and he mocks Americana ideas, Midwestern values and all that stuff. And then he goes into a mosque, and then there's a nice little old lady and she goes and talks to him, and she's all reasonable, and I'm sure it's an actor, but it was basically pro-Jewish propaganda. So you have this movie that's chock full of anti-American propaganda, just chock full of it, just dirtying Americans, and then suddenly you get this nice piece that's like all pro-Jewish, and then it goes back to just mocking America. And it's like, you clearly work for Mossad. You clearly are an Israeli operative. Anyway, so anyway, as I was saying about this thing, Ufka, I'll continue reading it. Ufka was trained extensively by the Mossad and the CIA, and this included expertise in torturing people. Both agencies were already keeping a close eye on the Apollo, and an official of the US State Department had previously made a blustering threat to blow the ship out of the water. So this is interesting. So it's tricky. It's like Hubbard was working with the CIA, but then at the same time, someone from the State Department was trying to blow the ship out of the water. But it could be that they were just putting out... They had the Scientologists and they were using it as a cover group. But at the same time, they were releasing information to make people think that they were against the Scientologists, so people wouldn't think that the Scientologists were tied in with the government. Do you see what I mean? So at the same time, they don't really do anything to stop the Apollo ship, but they release statements saying, yeah, the Apollo ship's bad. You see what I mean? Or, yeah, we've got to stop the Apollo ship. And it creates the impression that they have nothing to do with the Apollo ship. They're like, no, we don't like the Scientologists. We made those press statements that, what are you doing with these Scientologists? Do you see how shifty things are? It's all head fucks. Just think from their point of view. If you had some cult that you created that you were using to do intelligence ops, right? And you didn't want anyone to know that, and there was a rumor going around that you were connected, that cult was connected with the CIA. What would you do? You would then release a press statement saying, get the Scientologists, get them, but you're never really going to get them. You're just saying get them. And you're tricking them. You're tricking people to create the impression that Scientologists are not connected with the government. And it works. Amongst Scientologists, they think, and I used to think it, that no, Scientology is anti-government. There's no connection between Scientology and the government. The government were after Scientology. And that's what we thought. But then you find out that no, there was some FBI going after them, but they were getting protected a lot. Ooh, you know. It's just, the games are so wild. Hubbard's potential influence on an important nation like Morocco, which was viewed as a unifying force in the Arab world, was too much for such agencies to tolerate. It is easy to speculate that they bolstered Ufka's confidence to assassinate the king, because there is no way he could have pulled off such an effort without their support. Such agencies are indeed likely suspects in the murder of the secret police chief. You know, I don't know. It's very complex. So it's so tricky. You have to know all this sort of stuff to try and work out what is going on. But all I'm saying is, after all the stuff I've looked in, all these things I know about, to me the most logical, reasonable, rational explanation is that Hubbard was involved with the CIA plot to assassinate the Moroccan king. I think that's the most logical explanation after looking at all the data. And I think that the most logical explanation is that Hubbard was an intelligence operative definitely before Scientology, and during Scientology he offered services here and there to government agencies. That's what I think. Might have been CIA, might have been Naval, might have been some British intelligence, might have been some Mossadness, stuff like that. Okay. Now, so there's Billy Meyer, who's a UFO guy. He started a UFO cult, and he seemed to be a Israeli intelligence guy. He's in Switzerland, but he's a cult. He used to be an Israeli intelligence guy, and then later on in life he moved on to becoming a UFO cult leader. And that's another situation where it's like, is that a disinformation operation? Like, put out information about UFOs and control the UFO community, and it's actually intelligence op, and they use this guy that's like a cult leader, but he's actually an intelligence operative. So if you look into Billy Meyer, and again, that would be a very deep very deep thing to look into. It'd be too much to look into it, but if you look into it and you find out, oh, an intelligence agency actually created a UFO cult leader, then intelligence agencies do that sort of stuff. And it changes your world opinion of when you see kooky cults and stuff like that. It's the Jim Jones thing. Like I'm saying, Jim Jones, the guy who did the Jonestown massacre and involved with the CIA. You know, if that's true, and that can occur, you go, whoa, hold on a second. So the CIA, intelligence agencies create cults, and they do things for political reasons using the cover of a cult. And that's QAnon. Okay, so LRH apparently said that his military records had been falsified or changed by the government, and he said this back around 1970. So that's this idea that Hubbard's military record is just bullshit. And that's what I think, and that's why people like John Attack, who has investigated if Hubbard was a government agent, he thinks that Hubbard wasn't a government agent. And it's like, firstly, he has no idea about conspiracies and how the world really operates. So, of course, he's not going to be able to spot if Hubbard was an agent or not. He really needs to work 10 years in the CIA and then come back and go, oh, well, maybe, you know. If you have no idea about these secret groups and how they operate, you're not going to be able to spot their activities. But he's read all this stuff about Hubbard's military record, and it's like, you could just be reading falsified documents that they've planted there intentionally to make people think that Hubbard wasn't involved with the government and to confuse Hubbard's military record. Do you see what I mean? So that when you're an intelligence operative, they don't just have this record of everything you did and release it to the public and go, yeah, Joe Blow was an intelligence agent and this is all the things he did and this is his accurate, 100% true record. No, they don't. They put out a bullshit fake record. You know, because they don't want the truth about what they've been up to getting out. So John Attack can read all the fake documents about what Hubbard did in the military, but they're fake, they're bullshit. And Hubbard, this is what Hubbard said in 1970. He goes, what did he say here? His military record has been falsified. That's what Hubbard said, like around 1970. He said it to someone on the Apollo. Because my military record's bullshit. You know what I mean? And so he knew, like, and because he knows, like, it's just bullshit. But John Attack has the argument that, well, his military record has all these bad things in it, and so wouldn't you come up with a nice little neat fake record? And it's like, no, because what's most believable? Most believable is putting in bad stories and stuff like that, because that's more believable. If you came up with this nice, neat little thingo, you could look at it and go, well, this is just fake. But if you come up with a record that you read and go, this is ridiculous, like how bad is this guy? It makes it seem more believable. Do you see what I mean? And John Attack's adamant that he believes his military record. So it worked on him, it tricked him. So he was tricked when he was involved with Scientology, and now he's tricked when he's involved with anti-Scientology. He still doesn't get the whole story. He doesn't realize how shifty it is. Like if I was going to come up with a fake record, let's say I was involved with the military, and then I left, and then someone asked me to come up with a fake record of what I did while I was involved with the military, I would put in some bad things. You know what I mean? I would put in some bad stuff because it would make it seem more real. You see what I mean? Because it would be like, oh yeah, there was this stuff up, and you put in maybe an embarrassing story, and why would he make up a fake record with such an embarrassing story? It seems so legitimate. You see what I mean? It's all about tricking people. This is how intelligence agencies work. It's all about tricking people. Hubbard was expert at this, tricking people, conning them, making them think this is real when it's not real. So that's why I reckon Hubbard's military record had all these dodgy things in it. And because he was a dodgy person as well. So some of the things in his military record might have been actually true, might have been actual dodgy things that he was involved with, but also he added in more dodgy things, and it just made this crazy record, you know? And then the government, if the government was using Hubbard for operations with his Apollo ship, they don't want anyone thinking that Hubbard's involved with the government. They want them thinking that Scientology is just a kooky cult. So they would make up a record that's terrible, so that then people look at it and they don't think, oh, this is a James Bond type guy. He's classy. He can get stuff done. This guy's concerning. Because imagine you look into it, right? Let's say you're the Moroccan king and you look into Hubbard's military record because you're trying to work out what's the truth about Hubbard and his Scientology group and stuff, and are they involved with the American government, or are they just this cult and stuff. And you look up Hubbard's military record and you see all these smooth, classy, successful operations executed perfectly. This perfect military officer. And you go, this guy could have been promoted to an agent because he was so successful, and then later on in his career he moved on to doing operations with the CIA. That to me would be concerning. But if you look at Hubbard's military record and you find out, personally, you know he's kooky, he's got this weird cult, he's like an alcoholic. And then you go, well, let's look at his military record, and you see all this crazy shit in his military record, that he was just this crap officer and stuff. You think, yeah, this is just some crazy, funky American dude, and he's incompetent, and you're not concerned that he's this smooth James Bond agent. Do you see what I mean? But he's really a James Bond agent. Do you see what I mean? So that's why you want to have a dirty record, you know? So the Moroccan king looks at it and goes, nah, the CIA wouldn't use some guy like this. I mean, look at what it was like in the Navy. He was just this shitty officer, and he did this stupid attack on a magnetic deposit for like 12 hours, and like he's just a shit agent, you know? So there's all, you know, this is why I wouldn't be too concerned about looking at Hubbard's military record from the government, because it's just fiction land. It's just bullshit. Okay? Now, okay, now, in the Mission Earth book, I probably already mentioned this, but there's a story of, there's a part of the book where someone gets killed in an aeroplane. Well, they shoot down the aeroplane, and they make the person supposed to die in the airplane crash, and they don't die and they survive. And it just seems like Hubbard's just put into fiction story what happened with the Moroccan king, where they shot down the plane and the person was supposed to die, but they didn't die. I should probably look that up actually again and actually fully read that to get all the data. That really might worth be doing, because Hubbard might actually literally, in that segment of the book, literally just lay out what actually happened with the Moroccan king, but be using it with Jero Hello and his wife in the storyline. But anyway, it just seems like Hubbard's put into fiction what he actually did in real life. Now, okay, this is another thing. Gosh, I've still got so much more to go. You know what? I'm going to have to make this another part. Okay? I'll finish this one up. I'll say one more point. So there was this is a weak point again, but it contributes to it. So there was I did an interview on a podcast, like it's a lefty podcast from the San Francisco area. So they're like nice people, but you know, obviously I'm not in full agreement because they're lefties. So I've been on their show a few times over the years, and I went on their show a few months ago, and on it I mentioned how I'm not really a Scientologist anymore, and how Hubbard seemed to have been involved with the government. And I mentioned Karen de la Carriere and how she seems to be involved with the cover-up of Hubbard's connection to the government and stuff like that. And apparently when they posted the video onto YouTube, and someone filed a copyright claim, and the guy contacted me and said, "Why'd you file a copyright claim?" And I go, "I didn't file a copyright claim. I don't care. You know, it's your video." So someone filed a copyright claim or something, and it got the video and his channel, I think, taken down. Then when I explained how I didn't file the copyright claim, it seems that he thinks that it could be because of him filming some COVID protesters or something like that. And it could be, okay? I'm just saying it just seems a bit strange. Because he wasn't, I don't fully trust him because he's, you know, he's a lefty and stuff like that. Because they deny conspiracies. Like they when I said to them that Karen was involved with the cover-up of Hubbard and all that stuff, they weren't like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting, Andy." They're just like, no. They can't handle those sort of ideas because they just can't handle conspiracies. So when I suggest that it was Karen who could have got the video taken down, they're just like, "Oh no." So they just think it's like because they filmed some COVID protesters. But why would he, when he sees his channel get taken down, why would he instantly assume that it was the video that he posts with me in it? Because he's got all these videos. And why would he initially say to me that there was a copyright thing reported on the video we did or something? It just seems strange. You know, because the reason why Karen didn't like the interview I did with them was because I called Karen out, and I called out Hubbard's government connections, right? And what's Karen's job? Karen's job seems to be covering up on the internet the truth about Hubbard and the government. So if I do some video on their thingo, she'll want to get taken down. And you might say, well, why wouldn't Karen want to get my videos taken down? Well, because I'm not involved with the anti-Scientology movement. But this podcast, they're involved with, they're like lefties and stuff like that, but they've gotten involved with the anti-Scientology movement. That's why. They've had numerous people who are involved with the anti-Scientology movement be on their show. And they've had Karen on their show, and they were friends with Karen as well. But then they had a falling out with Karen, right? And they actually did some video, and this might be why, because of the other videos they've done with Karen, and she's just, this last one with me in it was enough for them to say, no, we've got to take down this guy's channel. But they did an interview with Karen, and no, they did, something happened, but they had a falling out with Karen, and they wanted to get Stephen Mango, right? Because Stephen Mango was the guy who helped expose that they were government agents. And now it seems that he's gone quiet. Because I think they've threatened him. Because, like I'm telling you, I wouldn't know about this whole Karen thing if it wasn't for Stephen Mango. He's the one who sent me down that journey. And then I was like, oh my God. When now that I found out about Hubbard potentially being an agent, now I know why Karen's there controlling the anti-Scientology movement. Because she is making sure it's a little tight, controlled group that just thinks Hubbard's a nutter. And it was a crazy cult created by Hubbard and there's nothing to do with the government. And that's what she's there for, right? And so she has to control reality. That's what you're doing when you're doing all this disinformation stuff for the government, whether it's for COVID or for chemtrails or whatever. You're there to control that community and make sure they don't know the truth. If it's a UFO thing, you control the community and you make sure they're confused, you make sure they're infighting, and you make sure they don't come to any actual truth. So the anti-Scientology movement, what's the agenda of the anti-Scientology movement? To not know that Hubbard was an intelligence operative, to not know that Hubbard was doing stuff for the government, to make them all think that Hubbard was a nutter and that everything went wrong came down to Hubbard being a nutter and Miscavige being evil, and that's it. That's why there's the problems in Scientology. And that's why you got ripped off, and that's why you're upset, and that's why now you hate Scientology. It's not anything to do with the government. It's not anything to do with intelligence agencies or anything. Don't ever think that. You know, and that's what Karen's there to control. So if I start saying things that are thought, that are against her agenda, she doesn't like that, right? And if this other group called Echoplex, the one I did the interview on, was starting to get towards the truth, they don't like that. Because they've tried to get Stephen Mango on their show and I don't think they've got it. Or yeah. But because Stephen Mango's gone quiet now because he's exposed them and they're just like, no. I don't know what they did. They might have offered him money to shut him up. But I tried to get him on my podcast because I want to talk to him. But he can't talk about this stuff. He's been threatened now. He's got to shut up now. You know? And this other podcast, they started to catch on to, because they worked out that Karen, what happened is they did a podcast that was talking about, that was making fun of Stephen Mango, because Stephen Mango was saying how Karen was ripped him off with auditing. And I was saying, yeah, Karen was pretending to be an auditor, right? And she was potentially doing some sort of intelligence op on you or something. And then anyway, Stephen Mango says his whole story, right? Hopefully the video is still on YouTube. And it totally makes Karen out to be an operative, and it totally makes her out to be pretending to be an independent Scientologist while at the same time pretending to be a Scientology hater. And this is where Echoplex comes into it, because they play back in their video, they play back Steve talking, and at the start they're laughing at Steve, going, look at Steve making fun of Karen, because they were friends with Karen at the start, because Karen goes to anyone who's getting to Scientology and on the internet, and she becomes friends with them. She sort of did it to me at the start a little bit. When she saw I was too switched on or whatever, she just broke away. And then like I haven't done an interview with her or anything, which doesn't surprise me because I'll ask her hard questions. But at the start, she makes sure she's in with anyone who's potentially getting views and a following about Scientology. She did that with Echoplex Media because they were talking to anti-Scientologists. So she got in with Echoplex and they liked Karen. Echoplex were making fun of Stephen Mango, who was picking on Karen. And as Stephen Mango runs through his video and keeps on saying things, the Echoplex, right, Dave from Echoplex starts going, hold on a second. What this Steve guy's saying is starting to make sense. Hold on a second. Is Karen pretending to be an independent Scientologist? Is she pretending to order people and taking their money? Is she being a scumbag? Right? Because Karen was saying how Scientology is crap. Scientology is bad. Yeah, I like you, Echoplex. We're part of the anti-Scientology movement. But then she was auditing people and accepting money to order people in Scientology. And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. That's wrong behavior. That's scam artist level. Like, they think that all Scientologists are running a scam, but at least they don't know that they're running a scam. But for Karen to actually know that she's running a scam and to audit Stephen Mango knowingly, That's dodgy as hell. To go on to do videos on the internet saying how crappy Scientology is and bag the tech and Hubbard, and then the next day go in session with someone and be like, yeah, you got to do Scientology to help you and it's good. That's totally wrong behavior. So anyway, Echoplex, Dave from Echoplex started working this out, right? And then, so then he started becoming anti-Karen. And then Karen would be onto him because he would be like, oh, Karen would be like, shit, you know what I mean? This Echoplex guy has started to catch on to my real agenda. So Karen could have reported all these videos and stuff, and with the one with me in it as well, for copyright or whatever, to try and take down his channel because Echoplex is no longer part of the anti-Scientology movement which they are controlling. Echoplex was threatening, and Steve Mango as well, was threatening to divert the anti-Scientology movement into what they didn't want. They didn't want to go into these territories, and they didn't like, Karen probably didn't like that I went on Echoplex and spoke about these things. Because you have to understand, Karen's potentially paid by the government to do this. So she sits on the internet, she has the time, and she goes, oh, look at this, hold on a second, Andy Nolch's on Echoplex? Oh, let's listen to this. Oh, how dare Andy say these things? See, Karen could be listening to each one of these ones I'm doing right now. So if you're listening, Karen, hello. But I'm on to you. I can tell there's something going on with you. I'm not a dumbass, okay? But what pisses me off about you is you know about conspiracies, you prick. I hope you're not getting the COVID jab, and I hope you're not promoting the COVID jab. I hope you're not promoting 9/11 and all that crap and the school shootings and shit. You know that it's not just Scientology where there's conspiracies going on. There's damn well conspiracies in all these things. It's real shit. And when you're contributing to it, because you're compartmentalized doing your little thing, but you're doing something shifty. And then when you have all these people doing all these shifty things, you then just go, whoa, fake shootings, whoa, 9/11, whoa, depopulation agenda going on. And the whole world's just fucked up. So I think you should be more honest. That's what I think, Karen. I don't like what you're doing. I understand you're trying to cover up Hubbard's connection to the government and stuff, but like, I don't know. Secret agencies are just a big problem. Like once you open up a department of the government, a particular department that's dedicated to doing secret activities, you're just asking for it to go off the rails. I don't know. I get the argument that you need to have a secret group like fighting for your country's rights. But then at the same time, that secret group could get infiltrated and corrupted and could end up 50 years later, it's just doing outrageous shit and you're just like, what? That's crazy. I'm for a government that is so weak, is so restricted, has so little power. That's what I'm for. Because when you give them power and funding and these big intelligence agencies and all this stuff, it just goes off the rails. And we're seeing here in Melbourne, you know, like a government that's just gone crazy. It's because they've just got all this funding and stuff. Starve them to death, drain them of resources. I want the government almost pretty much not even existing. I don't even want a government. Because once you create one, eventually scumbags get in there and they corrupt it and they twist it and they fuck it all up. Okay? So that's why I'm actually deep down, I'm really anarchist. Anarchist means no law. Just nothing. Because people are reasonable. People don't steal from each other. If the police were just disbanded right now, Australia wouldn't collapse. Like if you did it slowly and stuff, you know. It's actually having the police actually creates turmoil and corruption and stuff. The justice system, which is supposed to create a nice, lawful, respectable society, actually does the opposite. The justice system actually perpetuates crime and corruption and fucks everything up. Anyway, I'm going off topic. But I don't know for sure, okay, because it's hard to communicate with these lefties. Because when I say lefties, I mean they're lefties, this Echoplex thing. So they won't even tell me correct communications. But their channel got taken down, and they accused me of making a copyright claim, and that's why I got taken down. Why would they accuse me of that? That's all I'm saying. Where would they get that idea? Okay. And then they just come up with the conclusion after that, oh, you know, we posted some stuff of COVID protesters and stuff, and that's what got the channel taken down. You know? And that's them explaining it away because they can't confront the hardcore truth of it, which is what I said to them. I said, oh, that was probably Karen who made the copyright claim because I was accusing her of being a government agent in the interview, and she didn't like that because she's trying to cover up that she's a government agent. You see what I mean? So, I don't know, but I'll tell you what, if you're able to find out that Karen de la Carriere was involved with taking down the Echoplex YouTube channel, then damn well that is a big indication that Karen's involved with the cover-up. Karen is trying to stop the truth about Hubbard coming out. And that's why they run their Surviving Scientology podcast, because it's good information, but also it's edited, right? You know it's edited, right? And I imagine that while they're creating the history of Scientology, they're talking to people who were around Hubbard. They're talking to former Scientologists, top Scientologists. When they release that video to the public, they take out little bits of gems that might indicate that Hubbard was an agent. They take that little story that someone, maybe there was maybe on the Surviving, which is a great podcast, but it's edited, beware, you know, and it's made by potentially people who are trying to cover up the truth about Scientology. But on that, let's say they interview someone for the Apollo ship, and that person says, oh yeah, no, we were infiltrating the government of Morocco and stuff like that, and like when the guy goes to interview it, to edit the interview, he goes, oh, you know, we'll take that bit out of the interview because that implicates Scientology for being involved with the government, and our job is to cover that up. So we're going to take out that little clue there. Because you can only get little clues with all these things. And then someone like you or me goes and listens to this Surviving Scientology podcast, and we hear the story on the ship, and we don't hear any data about Scientology and the Moroccan government. And we're like, oh, okay. It keeps our minds away from those ideas. They're creating reality. That's what they do. They're creating the reality of Scientology history. Okay? They're editing Scientology history to stop you finding out about the government connection. And that is why they might have deleted the Echoplex Media YouTube channel. And you don't have to go find this interview that I did with them, by the way, because I didn't say anything that groundbreaking. I just said that, yeah, Karen seems to be involved with the government and stuff, like the same stuff I talk about in these thingos. But the reason why maybe they're not taking down my videos now is because, well, I don't get that many views anyway, because my channel's too unusual for people to believe it. But I'm not a part of the anti-Scientology movement, so I don't have a following. I'm not in that whole thing. You know what I mean? But if I kept on, let's say if I kept on promoting independent Scientology and actually really got active in the independent Scientology movement and really got them heading towards the idea that Hubbard was a government agent, then I'll cop some heat. And then they'll be like, get him. But I'm just doing this briefing series and ending this podcast, and that's it. I'm not continuing any of this. You know? I'm just putting the information out there so people can get an idea. All the reasons why I think Hubbard was involved with the government. You know? But yeah, Karen, I reckon the Moroccan incident is a big smoking gun, that Hubbard was an agent. I reckon that what Hubbard did prior to Scientology was a big smoking gun, because, you know, like if he was a Naval Intelligence officer, it's like maybe they're those officers for life. If he was involved with intelligence ops prior to Scientology secret runs, then what if he just continued them into Scientology, right? And the Karen situation. To me, you look at those three things and you put them together and you go, this is starting to indicate that Hubbard was involved with the government. You know? Anyway, I've got another part that I'm going to have to do on these videos. And I'm sorry that they've gone for so long, but there's just so much to go into in each of these points. And it looks like God wants me to keep on doing this briefing about Hubbard being an agent. So I don't know why. But I've been trying to finish this podcast, but I can't. Now I have to go into part 5 of this thingo, and then I've still got like 2 others after that. And maybe 2 other interviews, but this is just dragging on. I want to get on to my new podcast, but I guess as I'm researching this, I'm learning more and more. Like I'm listening to a book about Crowley at the moment, a book by Crowley at the moment. And in his fiction book, it's called Diary of a Drug Fiend. It doesn't really seem like fiction, but I guess it's fiction, but it sounds like a story of him just going around being high on drugs and stuff and then having withdrawal symptoms the whole time. And it's interesting and philosophical. But in the story is secret agents. So that's, to me, is evidence that Crowley is a secret agent because he's aware of these things. That, like, if I wrote a fiction story and it mentioned football, right, it's because it's been a part of my life and those ideas are in my universe, so it goes into my fiction story. So the same with Crowley, ideas about agents go into his fiction story. Same with Hubbard. He talks about agents a lot and intelligence ops and stuff because, you know, like Mission Earth, agents and intelligence ops and undercover things and all that sort of stuff, because he was involved with that sort of stuff. There's also the body double idea. That's another point that I should mention before I finish this podcast. The body double idea was a theory that Hubbard died in like 72 and then there was a body double that took over. I think it's absolute bullshit, but I think they're getting confused. I think that there is evidence out there that there was a body double for L Ron Hubbard, right? And that they're getting confused by that and thinking that Hubbard died in 72 and that's why Scientology went down the toilet or something like that, because the body double took over. I don't fully know the theory, but it's just wrong. I really looked into it. It's wrong, okay? Hubbard was around all the way up to 86, okay? He totally was. But why would they have this idea of a body double, this conspiracy theory, this false idea? Because I think there is evidence that there was a body double of L Ron Hubbard. And what do intelligence agents have? And public personalities have? They have body doubles. And it confuses people and stuff. Like Hitler, for example, had like 6 body doubles. Trump had a body double. I don't know how many, could have had more than one, but they have to do it for security reasons and stuff. But if you look into the body double thing, I can't be bothered, but if you look into it and you really do find out it seems like there was a body double for L Ron Hubbard, that's another clue that he was a government agent. Because if he was a government agent, they would have helped set him up with a body double and they would have sent the body double here while he was doing something else there. And I wonder if Crowley's life had the same thing because of this Strange Angel TV show, which in the Strange Angel TV show, there was a body double for Crowley. And it's just interesting because I can't be bothered looking into Crowley's life, because you'd have to look into Crowley's life as deep as you'd have to look into Hubbard's life in order to find out if Crowley had a body double. But I just want to find someone who's really smart, who's switched on, who knows about the body double of L Ron Hubbard and knows if it's true. But I've just heard that there was some strange things that went on, and there's evidence indicating that there was a body double with Hubbard, right? But I'd like to get to the bottom of that, because if you get to the bottom of that and he did have a body double, then it's like, oh, that's more indication that he was an intelligence operative. So it's just like, you just look at all the data, you stand back and you just go, the most logical explanation is that he was an agent. Anyway, I've been your host, Andy, Ultra Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.